Hi folks, Joblog Comics here. I was just watching a YouTube video that somebody had posted about the current state of pop culture due to AI, possibly an era that we're going through where we're just consuming slop, constantly consuming slop, and of course it made me think about comics. Why? Because everything makes me think about comics, and I was just wondering, well, what was the last really challenging run of comics that you ever read? What was the last real run that you bought month to month where you thought this comic's really, doing something different or challenging my outlook upon the whole industry and making me think about where comics are and what they're doing and as a reader as well, making me think about the themes and think about the characters and think about the situations and think about the world that they're trying to build. So, had a wee look through my own collection. You could always name the standards. You could always think about, of course, Watchmen, 1986. You think about Watchmen, what Alan Moore did with that, and how it was a really challenging read, and it was complex and it was layered and it covered lots of themes, and it stood up to multiple rereadings. I mean, how many times have you read Watchmen? I've been through Watchmen several times, like from issue 1 through to 12, always finding new things in it, always seeing different ideas, even in the artwork and in the dialogue, the characters, and it was something at the time I remember never reading anything like it and thinking, yeah, this book is different. So, when was the last time you really experienced anything different within a comic book? I've picked a few examples here that might make you want to go to the back issue bin, see if you can find some. I've tried to go for stuff that's easy to find and isn't expensive. Of course, Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's Superman run, this mini series here. I don't know if how much of an influence this would have been on the new Superman movie, but it is infinitely better than that new Superman movie. And again, focuses on the character of Superman, and it challenged the reader to see him in a different kind of light. So that was one of my picks. Yeah, Alan Moore's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen took the idea, which I think had been done before in literacy before, but these were a lot of out of copyright characters that Moore put together as a kind of Victoriana Avengers. So there was the Invisible Man, there was Captain Nemo, and there was Dr. Jekyll, and there was all these different literary characters. And half the fun in reading these books was like spotting those references and thinking about where they came from. Plus, of course, like Kevin O'Neill's artwork is just mental. So I really enjoyed that. There's been a few volumes of this. I did fall away from it a little bit, but initially this was thought provoking and it was different and it was mature, even though it was a silly idea. And it may have been done before, but never like this and never as a comic book. So for me, yeah, that was quite a challenging read. Even going back in the day, one off comics like this, look what I paid for that, £1.50. Spider Man versus Wolverine, a one off sort of graphic novel, although it was just a comic book. I think I did a video on this before. This really went into a sort of in-depth look at the characters of Peter Parker and Logan and explored the differences between them, their operating procedures. And at the end of this comic book, and I know this comic book is in canon because it exposed that Ned Leeds was the Hobgoblin and they had killed him off in this comic. So it isn't canon, but Spider-Man gets involved in a situation where he is responsible for the death of one of the characters in it. It's never, I mean, we all know about Gwen, we all know about Captain Stacy, and we all know about those, but this never ever been referenced again. If you ever see this Spider-Man versus Wolverine comic, you really need to pick it up and then read that story and tell me that this was not a challenging read. I found it incredibly powerful and incredibly well written. And when they talk about mature comic books, I don't know if it gets much more than the PTSD that Peter suffers over the actions that happened in this book. Grant Morrison again here. Biased because he's Scottish, isn't he? But Ian for Extinction 1 of 3. This was the start of the new X-Men, where Grant Morrison took this group and did something completely different with them. Super high concept science fiction ideas merged with Marvel's greatest mutant superheroes. It was always going to be a challenging read. It worked when it worked, but when it didn't work, it did it relied an awful lot on some tropes. But of course, Morrison would take those tropes and give them a sort of twisted appearance that we're maybe not quite used to seeing in the pages of a Marvel book. So if you never read New X-Men, you get these really, really cheap. Yeah, there's some great ideas. Not all of it's good. Some of it's rubbish. But for a challenging read, yeah, you really couldn't do wrong. Miracle Man, if you've never read Miracle Man, Alan Moore once again took this golden age hero. It was Marvel Man back then, wasn't it? Again, a rip-off of Shazam, pretty much. And there was a Marvel Man that was in his own comic books, but he updated it in the pages of Warrior magazine, and eventually it got picked up in America and completed when Warrior went under. This explored what would happen if there was a real Superman living in our world, and of course it's a terrible and tragic story that leads to a utopia that is, ultimately unable to suffer the weight of its own gravity. But if you've never read Miracle Man, I suggest as a challenging read. Yeah, this is one of the best ones there. What would happen if there was a Superman and a sort of super villain that would fight each other? Yeah, they would pretty much destroy the world, and that's kind of what happens. So you can get these reprints of Murder. There's a reprint of the story. Alan Moore wouldn't put his name to it at this point, but you can get these super, super cheap, and I would only read the Alan Moore stuff. Everything else, I wouldn't bother. Identity Crisis, loved by some, hated by others. But, at least it was a challenge. Yeah, it took the Justice League kicking and screaming into a sort of true crime type situation. It was a whodunit. It was a murder mystery. It was the death of a major character that really, really upset. Now, a lot of people just thought, no, this is not the way these things should be. And I kind of understand where they're coming from as well. But you can't deny that it wasn't a challenging read at the time. And it was very, I suppose at the time, was it brave, or was it groundbreaking, or was it gratuitous and just shocking for the sake of shocking? I don't know. Make your own mind up if you've never read this. You get these really cheap as well, you lot. But it certainly was challenging, and it really raised a few eyebrows at the time. Yeah, for me it was a good one. American Flag, I love Howard Chaykin, I love his artwork, I love his stylized depiction of characters, even though all his characters do pretty much look the same. But you got to admit that American Flag, which to me was always just an American rip-off of Judge Dredd, mind you, I don't know if trade dress gets any better than the American Flag logo. But this was multi-layered, complex characters, adult situations, subplots that were all eventually tied up and resolved, amazing situations, great science fiction. It was so good. First loved it. Howard Chaykin got bored with it. So they ran it into the ground, then they tried to bring Howard back to recreate the old magic. Didn't quite work. But see, the first couple of years of American Flag, they're absolutely phenomenal. If you see these for 50 cents anywhere, grab them all, put them, you have to read them in order though. Yeah, so make sure you don't read them out of order, and experience the American Flag comic book. As far as a challenging read goes, yeah, you had to pay attention. You couldn't be reading this and looking at TikTok slop at the same time. You had to focus. And for me, that's a great challenging comic book that everybody, if you like comics, should read it, whether you like Howard or not. Yeah, this was just phenomenal. It's very mature, but hey, nothing wrong with that. Speaking of Howard Chaykin, this is much more recent. Again, this is a kind of controversial comic because what it does do is it looks at the actual sort of inner workings of the comic book companies from the the golden age right through to the silver age and the bronze age. You'll see these characters here, and they were all quite representative of people who worked in the comic book industry at the time. So this is not liked at all. I don't think readers liked it, and I don't think certainly the creative companies didn't like it. But as far as it being a challenging read, yeah, it certainly was. And if you were interested at all in the history of comic books, I think that Hey Kid Comics is definitely one that you should be reading. It covers a lot of things that went on in the comic book industry, and these were my favorite things. They would do these sort of mock-ups of these old comics that were all kind of based on, real comic books at the time. Howard was very careful with the way that he put these things across. But it's a study of the comic book industry from an angle that you have never seen it before. Was it tremendous? I don't know. They did quite a few volumes of this, yeah, quite a few series of them. I know some people just thought it was plodding and boring and everything that was wrong. But see, for me, I'm not so sure. I quite enjoyed it, and there is a certain element of figuring out who these fictional characters, some more obvious than others, so who they really meant to represent. If you put your mind to it, you could figure it out. You could figure it out quite easily. So, an expose of the comic book industry, or just Howard Chaykin's bitter and twisted look at things that used to be. I don't know. You tell me. Hey Kids Comics, I liked it. And then again, one more that we probably shouldn't talk about, Howard Chaykin's Black Kiss. It's only for weirdos and freaks, and there's lots of violence and nudity and bad language, and this book was banned everywhere, so I feel I shouldn't even be showing you this. Good Lord, Howard, what were you thinking? Challenging though? Yeah, I would say it was. So anyway, gang, there you go. That's a look at some challenging comic books that I've sort of just plucked out of my comic book collection. What are yours? Do you have any? Have you never thought about it before? When was the last time you were genuinely challenged by a comic book? When was the last time you read a comic book where you had to sit back and process what was going on, and it wasn't just, cheap, gratuitous, kill a hero, bring them back, end a universe, bring it back, take a well-known comic book character and then just, invert it and say it's in a different dimension? No, come on. Really? When was the last time you actually read something original that you thought, damn, that made me think? Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. If you did and you've taken the time to get to the end of this, why don't you leave a comment? Let me know what your favourites are, and I shall see you all on the next one.